Lag, lag. Oh, all right. Welcome back to the show. I have two guests today, and we're going to be talking about their book, The Endless Game. With me is JD Amato. Is that correct?
That's
And
correct. You nailed it.
Sophie Morris. How are you guys doing?
Doing well.
Doing great.
So before we get talking about the book, I'd like to, hear a little bit about yourselves as readers, comic readers, cartoon readers, and as creators. So I'll let you guys decide which one of you wants to go first.
Sophie, why don't you kick us off?
Okay. My name is Sophie. I'm an illustrator based in Boston. I've been working as an illustrator for the past nearly 10 years. This is our debut graphic novel. It's my first ever kind of traditionally published comic book. And we're both really excited with how it turned out and excited to chat about it.
Yeah, and I'm JD. I'm the author of the book. And like Sophie, it's my debut novel. We got a double debut in the house. And yeah, it's been, I work traditionally in the TV space as a writer, director, showrunner of mostly comedy shows. And so this is my sort of first foray into graphic novel world. And so Sophie's a lot more accustomed to this universe, but for us, it was our first time doing a book at all together. So we sort of dove in head first and figured it out.
And did you guys read comics growing up? How were you introduced to the medium?
Yeah, I mean, I was definitely a comic book kid. I didn't really have. It took me a while to get an allowance, and so I was mostly a walk through the aisles of a comic book store and wish I could get comic books kind of kid. And then by the time I could get comic books, I felt a little out of the loop. So I feel like I was more the like Calvin and Hobbes anthology, sort of like Far Side, that universe, and then I'd read like a random trade issue of a comic book and be in the middle of a story and be like, I don't understand what's happening, but it seems like Spider-Man's going through something right now. So I always had like a nostalgia and a desire to sort of get. There was a sort of a mystery of the unknown, of not knowing that. And then in our town, we had our local comic book shop that was like, as we got older, like the place that was our refuge in town. It's called the Comics Gallery in Wilmette, Illinois. And we'd all meet up there. And Vern, the owner, was the sort of the overseeing adult figure for a bunch of kids causing trouble. And I was very much a reluctant reader as a kid too. And so I think the graphic novel universe would have been up my alley, but I'm an age where that sort of middle grade graphic novel universe really didn't exist. And so that was sort of exciting for this, was sort of seeing that new universe. But I feel like I would have been into it if I had had access to it.
Yeah. For me, growing up as a kid, also of Calvin and Hobbes, of course, I used to read a lot of my brother's Tintin books because he had a huge collection. I got more into comics / graphic novels when I was in college studying illustration. I used to go to Small Press Expo in Bethesda, Maryland, where I used to meet all sorts of different like comic artists, illustrators, authors, able to kind of pick up graphic novels that way. And of course, we talked a lot about it, while studying illustration. It was a really big part of the curriculum. So I'd say in college is when I really got into it and started collecting graphic novels. I would say after college, around these days, I still collect my graphic novels, but I'm also getting really into more indie comics, like your classic risograph zines, screen printed zines. I go to like smaller art markets and get self-published comics that way, and it's been really fun to collect in those spaces.
Nice. So let's jump right into the endless game. Why don't we start off by kind of giving an overview of what the book is about?
Okay, so the Endless Game is a middle grade graphic novel. It's about a kid named Fred who moves to a new town and quickly learns that every kid in the town is part of a game of capture the flag that has divided the town in two and been going on for 80 years. And so it's been passed down from generation to generation, and like every kid in the town is a part of it. And there's like, a whole world run by kids that's like a part of this game. So there's like castles and jails and saloons, and the rules are overseen by the Council of Homeschool Kids. It's like a whole universe of the kids. And so it's about the Capture the Flag game, but really about all the kids in the game sort of figuring out where they fit in identity-wise to both the game and their lives and the town, and that sort of like transition into sort of those teenage years.
And how about the inspirations for the story?
Yeah, I mean, I think Sophie and I share a lot of inspirations for all. I mean, the basic premise of it came from the fact that, you know, I moved around a lot as a kid, didn't have that many friends growing up while we were moving around. And then when we landed in the Illinois suburbs is when the first time I met a ton of kids. And it sort of felt like this like whole universe opened up where we were outside in the summer playing these games, getting into trouble, sort of having these whole lives. And so that was like the immediate inspiration of the story. But then when Sophie and I started working together, we sort of realized that we both had that sort of shared experience. And so in terms of that like literal experience, it came from that. But then I think we're all pulling in a bunch of different sort of like story and adventure references. And, you know, we both had a penchant for those sort of like 90s kids adventure kind of stories, whether it's like the Goonies or whatever, where it's, you know, kids solving problems for themselves. I don't know, Sophie, what are the other references that you pulled in?
Definitely that. Something that drew me to the script in the first place when it was first pitched to me is that I had a really similar childhood, which is, you know, having a huge group of neighborhood kids that we all played together, very leafy suburb in Massachusetts. And I was really close with that group of kids, and we used to play high stakes games just like that. And just like in the book, where it's, you know, it's kind of their whole life, like this game, it was the same way growing up. We had similar stakes, at least in our heads. So I really loved that aspect of the book when I read it in the script, and I kind of brought my own experiences growing up in kind of a similar world to the book.
And so what? Why centering it around Capture the Flag, I guess?
Yeah, I mean, I think Capture the Flag, number one, I think is a pretty universal game, or at least a pretty universal game for kids that grew up in the American suburbs. But also, I think it speaks to sort of some of that it's a game that there's division in sides, and there's sort of hierarchy to it, and there's a singular goal, and there's like not that many rules. And so I think part of it is just like it's a narrative construct that I think makes sense to sort of you know, as kids, you get a lot of things get passed down to you from your parents or from where you grew up, or things that you might even not know what they are. And so I think Capture the Flag is sort of a good a good symbol of those things that sort of get passed down, that are those sort of like arbitrary goals that create division and sort of create that conflict. Because ultimately, Capture the Flag is like you're trying to get a flag, but what's the flag really represent or mean or do? But for everyone to get so whipped up about it is sort of something that I think we try to subtly explore in this also.
Yeah.
So let's talk about the characters themselves. You know, not only creating them but also designing them. How did you guys collaborate on that?
Sure. So I know for me, like JD would give me kind of like rough, this is very early on in the process. I would be given these kind of rougher descriptions. We had vague ideas of like what their goals were, what their very vague general look was, but that was really undecided. It was more like, here are their goals, here's the purpose in the story, but it was all very up in the air. So when it came to designing visually and also developing them structurally, early on in the process, it was honestly pretty basic, just calls back and forth. We would have a lot of Zoom meetings because, you know, this was 2021. And so Zoom was like what I knew best. And we would have Zoom calls all the time. I would be sending sketches frequently of just really a wide range of these designs. And then JD would like build off those designs. And then we'd come back to sketching and go back and forth until we found something that fit both our vision.
anything to add, JD? Or
No, I mean that was so much of it. Is I think also in terms of the character side of things, we were trying to trying to look at the different types of experiences you can have as a 10-year-old. I don't know, Chad. What part of the world did you grow up in? Where were you when you were 10?
I grew up in, for shame, West Virginia,
Oh, where in West Virginia?
Charleston area.
Okay, for sure. I've been to Huntington and Charleston. I know.
I'm sorry.
I know it well. I know. I did a whole TV show in Huntington, so I know the area well. But I think if you grew up in Huntington, then you know that like I feel like or not in Huntington, in Charleston. If you're up in Charleston, you probably had a similar experience of spending whatever summers out marauding around with your group of friends or going on your own adventures or whatever that is. And I think that's a lot of the place where you sort of like learn identity and like sort of like start figuring out sort of aspects of your personality. And so we just try to sort of think about like what are different experiences you might have as a kid in those worlds, and the different challenges you might have, the different roles you might try to fill, the different personalities you might try to put on, and try to sort of have a series of characters that sort of represented those different things. I mean, Sophie and I both share this feeling of, when I was growing up, I was always sort of compelled towards the characters in stories that were sort of like on the fringes. So like the main characters never really interested me. It was always like, well, I'm sort of more interested in that character over there that's in the background. And so we wanted to sort of create something that if you found yourself sort of drawn towards a side character, that character also had their own arc and their own story that you could follow. Mm-hmm. Just because I also think like there's especially in a story like this, there's so many different things that you could project yourself into. So yeah, we tried to make sure that like all those different types of kids and different experiences and different skills and things you're good at and things you struggle with are on display there.
Yeah.
And did either of you have a particular character that you kind of latched onto, or maybe, found hard to get a voice for, but as you wrote and developed them, it became easier?
Yeah, I think for me that there's two characters, Fred and Rusty, that I think are sort of like the two parts of my own personality that I guess also Raquel. I guess also, guess they're all hidden in there somewhere. But then I think for me, like there's side characters that are like the bikers, that are the kids that I'm also like, I kind of feel like those would be my people a little bit. I mean, one of the funny things about this whole process is that Sophie and I work together very closely in every aspect of it. And so throughout the entire, writing process and art process, we were trading ideas and going back and forth. And there's a handful of characters, and one in particular that I think Sophie's about to talk about that, started off as having a pretty minor role in the book. And then Sophie was so like, that's my character. That's the character that I'm into. That it was like, all right, well, that character's got to like keep showing up and keep having moments. So
yeah.
Sophie, what was that character?
I'm happy to talk about her. It's Silent Sarah, who I'm not sure if you've gotten to her yet. She still shows up relatively early, but I really loved her. She showed up as a side character originally. And funny, we talk about how, like, JD, you were saying you were interested as a kid with these side characters. That's kind of what happened here, too. I was like, I want to know more about her and her role. So we kind of developed her out because I just, was really interested. So she was really great. I really loved her. I also really enjoyed Raquel. That's a character I definitely could relate to. I think also a very fun character to draw. When it comes to like my faves, personally, how I really am deciding is like how fun it was to draw. And yeah, it was Raquel. I really loved her. Her braid was really fun. Or I think of like with Kelsey, I love drawing her hair, and her cool boots and things like that, right? But all the characters have like a spot in my heart, of course. Not only because I love their story, but I've drawn them now so often that like they force their way into my heart.
So you guys both mentioned that this was your first foray into the graphic novel world. JD, coming from a television background, what challenges did you face? What were you able to bring in from your other experiences?
Yeah, I mean the challenge that was most interesting was that I'm really in TV world. You're collaborating with sometimes hundreds of people, and so what was most challenging was sort of like the blank canvas nature of this. Is for both Sophie and I, it was sort of like when we sold the pitch of the book, then it was like, great, let us know when you got it, and we were both like, we just can do whatever we want. And I think what's fun is for the graphic novel is that you don't have to worry about budget or production or how you're going to pull something off. So you could, or at least I don't have to. I can just leave that to Sophie to figure out. But so it meant that you could sort of go anywhere, do anything, and you could tell any version of story you wanted to tell. And also, like, the length was up to you. So I think one of the challenges was just the sort of endlessness of the canvas. But also coming from TV and sort of screenwriting background, like one of the first things that I was like, okay, I'm in my comfort zone was Simon and Schuster was like, great. So we'd like you to deliver the manuscript in script format, in screenplay format. And I was sort of like, oh, great. Yeah. Then, cause part of me was worried. I was like, all right, I'm going to learn some new, graphic novel format or whatever. And then with like screenplay format, I was like, oh yeah, great. I can write a really long screenplay. It sounds good. And then of course, as whether this was a pro or con, Sophie can speak to, but I come from TV and film background, working as a director a lot. And so there's a lot of scenes where I was like, I kind of see it in my mind's eye, and I have an idea of where the camera might be or where, and sometimes trying to communicate that or, was either a pro or con up to depending on how much Sophie had her own separate vision. Yeah. Okay, great.
I definitely when it comes to handling in comics, what I learned originally, it's a detriment to view it as storyboarding. But in this case, with JD's help, it wasn't storyboarding we were doing. Being able to view it instead as cinematic shots, I think really kind of upped the ante of the story we were trying to tell. And I think added to the cinematic nature that we were going for. And I think assisted the book story.
Nice. So JD, it looks like you also have a stand-up comedian background. Did that help you with timing of dialogue and stuff?
Yeah, I come from the comedy world, and I think the thing that you sort of learn the most working in comedy is that comedy comes from stuff that's relatable and real. So jokes are less funny than just something that resonates in terms of the human experience. And so I think this book has a lot of comedy in it, but it comes from just I think the little details of life that maybe you're see and you're like, oh yeah, I know that kid, I know that feeling, I know that decision, that energy. So if anything, coming from a background world, from a comedy world, helped me try not to put too much comedy in it and let the comedy come from just seeing natural, relatable experiences. Yeah. Yeah.
I guess the only problem I had with the book was it's called The Endless Game, and it seems to end. I mean, I still have that problem with the never-ending story, but that's just
Chad. Well, I think this is a great. If it's up to you, we'll just keep going. Then we'll keep making more of them.
Well, are there if it goes well? Are there plans to do more, or kind of in the same vein, or?
Yeah, I mean, I think Sophie and I both have daydreamed about a lot of stories in this world and where it could go, and it sort of feels never-ending to us. It's a ton of work, and so I think we would be. I think we'd be down, but it's easy for me to say because I'm happy to write all of it. But then it's years of work for Sophie to get in there. But I think we'd both be excited at doing more. I don't know, Sophie. Where now a month after release, where are you at?
Now that I'm separated from it, I'm back in my naive worldview, and I'm like, let's make $1 million. Let's make it $1 billion this time. But genuinely, now with its experience, it's like really helped my practice, right? And I feel like I could do like a lot more many more projects, which is really exciting. Like it's a really great feeling. I think with this book in particular, what's also really helpful is that the heavy lifting is done, like the design, the look, the visual direction is done. So it's not like I would be starting from scratch necessarily. So it wouldn't be as like much of a challenge as say the first one was. I think also with JD and I, like now that we have this experience under our belt, like we feel ready to tackle another.
Yeah.
So, Sophie, let's talk a little bit about, we've heard about JD's process. Let's talk about yours. Do you work digitally? Do you do kind of a mix up of traditional and digital, or
I
how
definitely
do
do
you
a
do it?
hybrid. It's definitely a hybrid. I wish I could work 100% traditionally. There's a lot of illustrators I know who do that, dedicate their life to that. They, have their 11 by 17 Bristol board, their dip pens. They print out on their Bristol using blue ink to then scan it in, like really intense. I would love to do that, but with my kind of perfectionism and my schedules I keep, I do a hybrid. I typically do the thumbnails entirely in pencil. I print out like this, like basically a template that has like 50 small pages printed out on my printer paper. And I do my thumbnails that way. It's really fast. It's really loose. It stops me from getting too into the details. Instead, I'm focused completely on like the flow, the pacing. Did I reuse too many panel placements? And I can easily tell by having all these pages on like one sheet. From there, I do all my sketches digitally. It's just much easier to edit that way. I use Procreate on my iPad, which I've been using for like 10 years now, which is crazy. After that, I do edits and line work in Clip Studio, which I've also had for like 10 years. And then finally, all other edits, coloring, formatting, I use Photoshop. So I'm really switching between like 4 different programs to make sure that like my vision is achieved, basically.
And do you have, who are the artists, cartoonists that inspire you and inspire your work?
Yeah, it changes all the time, honestly. Like I have a kind of a huge list that like the number one spot is taken over by somebody else like pretty much every week. Because I'm always discovering like new people. When it comes to comics, graphic novels, one of my favorite graphic novels is, I have it like my bookshelf right next to me. It's This Was Our Pact by Ryan Andrews. Such an amazing graphic novel, amazing storytelling, great texture, really clear visual direction. I love that book. I used it a lot for inspiration for this one. Rebecca Mock is another amazing illustrator who does mainly editorial illustration these days, but has a whole host of amazing graphic novels as well. The Five Worlds series of graphic novels, I love them. Super cinematic, which is another thing I stole from them to bring into this book. And then finally, an artist that I got into really recently is Patrick Gleason, who did a lot of the Robin comics. Love his work, amazing line work, incredible storytelling. I recently got a bunch of the like Robin like books, not the floppy covers, but like the full like anthologies. Those have been really amazing to read through. I think his work is awesome.
And JD, how about you? Who are your, I guess, writing inspirations, comedic inspirations?
Yeah, I mean, I did grow up in comic book world as I got older, and so like I was a big like Jeffrey Brown was from my area, and so like his adult comics, then now his middle grade stuff, I think is like excellent. I grew up weirdly being very into Eddie Campbell as a kid, so like his Alex series and all of that other stuff, and so I like the sort of slice of life, sort of like very humanist comic stuff. I also grew up reading like Ecstatics was my favorite comic book. and I think I just like that sort of like cast of silly characters universe stuff. But then in like film world, I'm a big like Jacques Tati head, where like I love anything where all the details of the background and foreground, like you can sort of look anywhere and see anything. And Sophie and I for sure put a lot of stuff in where it's like, oh, if you look in the back corner of this frame, there's something going on you can follow. And yeah, there's a bunch of stuff in those different worlds. And then in doing this, I sort of got into the middle grade world, which has been super exciting, and just reading all of those books of whether it's the stuff that's just like about real kids, like Smile, or like the Amulet series, or any of the stuff that like kids are reading these days. It's been really fun to dive into and sort of see that whole space, because I don't know about you, Chad, but like that wasn't really around when I was a kid, and I'm like, if it was, it would have been amazing, I think.
I know my son, he's 9 years old, and he's big into the Max and the Midnights,
Yeah.
Captain Underpants, Dogman, Diary of a Wimpy Kid, and it gets him reading.
Yeah. And hopefully soon the Endless Game.
Yes.
Yeah, I keep slipping it onto his stack when I'm not reading it. So JD, is there anything that you learned, writing this graphic novel that you think you might be able to use in your TV work?
Yeah, I mean, something that's been fun is, I really wrote this story forward in terms of like, this wasn't something that was entirely sort of outlined out and resolved from the beginning. And so part of the fun was sort of throwing challenges at our characters and sort of seeing what felt like the natural conclusion to those, or seeing what would be an unlikely twist, and seeing how those characters would react to it. And for me, writing wise, that's been really fun, because in the TV world, you do a lot of outlining, a lot of pre-solving problems. And so I think if anything, I'll just sort of, the openness of the canvas here inspired me to sort of think about things in whatever direction they go. And that was like a real fun joy of this, is because we could throw a problem at our characters and go like, what would happen if like this didn't get resolved in a clean way? Or like, what if the good guys didn't win in this situation? How would our characters react to that? And sort of follow the threads of all of that. And then it all sort of finds a way to tie itself up nicely. So yeah, for sure, I would take that open canvas into the future.
Well, do either of you have anything, else you'd like to make sure that people knew about the book that maybe we didn't get to cover or directly?
No, I mean, I think for me, what's been fun about this book is it's been such a loving collaboration between Sophie and I, and we've worked so hand in hand on every aspect of this. And I think whether between both the Massachusetts suburbs and the Illinois suburbs, there's a real collaboration of kid experiences poured into this. And I don't know, I think we're both really proud of it. And for some, this is our first time doing it, and I think we came out of it feeling really happy with how it turned out.
Totally. Yeah. We're both really excited and really proud.
Well, you definitely should be, because I'm about halfway through it. It's a great story. It's a great book. It looks beautiful, and
Thank you.
I'm glad that it was brought to my attention. So as we kind of close up here, if you want to give one last pitch for the book, or anything else that you would like to, make sure people knew about, and where they could find you if you're on and brave enough to go into social media these days.
Yeah. All right. My pitch for the book is that whether you're an adult with an adventurous kid spirit, or if there's like a 7 to 12-year-old in your life that you want to get into, nuanced story with a lot of layers to it, I think there's a lot of adventure and action, and I think also a lot of goodness packed into the book. So I think if that's the case, check out the Endless Game, and wherever books are sold, bookstores near you. You can follow me at j.d.amato on Instagram. And then Sophie, what if you had to throw a pitch out there? What would you think?
My pitch would be, yes, whether you're a kid or an adult, if you love Capture the Flag, but to the stakes of Game of Thrones, there's Child Kings, there's prisons, there's wars, there's territories. If you're into that, I think you'd really love the book. And you can find me on Instagram at Sopharium, SOPHARIUM. Also, you can see all my work on my site at sophiemorse.com.
And are you guys going to be going out to any conventions or shows to promote the book?
I know I will be most likely at MICE here in Boston.
Yeah.
I will be trying to attend Small Press Expo in September. MoCA next year, the Museum of Comic and Cartoon Art Fest in New York, I think next spring. That is my current plan.
Well, JD, I'm sorry it's not a 12-hour podcast.
Well, yeah. Listen, it's some podcasts have to be short.
I can only imagine what that entails, but especially multiple episodes of it. But
We just keep
I want to
going,
thank,
yeah.
I want to thank both of you for taking the time this afternoon to chat about the book, and I look forward to hopefully more from the two of you in the future.
Cool.
Thanks for having us on. This was so fun.
Yeah, thank you.
Well, you're welcome back anytime.
Thanks so much.
Thanks.